Hey, peace and blessings to you. My name is Jerry B. I am the entree musician, and so are you. And I got to tell you, I don't know quite what to call Dr. Karen Moore. I mean, she is a musician. She is a playwright. She is a counselor. She is a consultant. She is an activist. She's she's a filmmaker. So I don't care. Karen, how do we introduce you properly? I don't know how to do it.
Just Karen.
Oh,
Just Karen.
why
It's
why didn't
good.
I think of that? But you are so multi-talented, and this is your second time here on the Entree Musician. So welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me again. I really appreciate being here.
We appreciate having you. The last time you had a handsome gentleman with you, I believe by the name of Robin Williams.
Yes.
Yes. And
Yes.
you had a young filmmaker, Amber, and she was just so incredible,
Yes.
Amber Spencer. So
Yes.
it's been a wonderful experience that we're creating now.
Yes. Yes. It has been fantastic. We are so grateful for every opportunity that comes up to be able to not only connect with you and the amazing things that you're doing, but just being able to talk with you. It's fantastic.
Yeah, we definitely have to come down to Philadelphia, my wife and I, and we're going to hang out. I
Yes.
hear another entree musician, Robbie Cunningham, had the opportunity to hang out with Robin, and that was real cool.
He
So
did. That was amazing. That was really amazing to be able to connect in person. Yes.
I'm a little jealous about it, but that's not why we're here. We're not here to talk about my insecurities, okay? We're here because you have embarked on an incredible project that we don't hear much communication about in the mainstream. And
Mhm.
as people who are watching this can see the website that they need to go to, the color
Yes.
of beautiful black. Would you, because you were the first person that I heard the term colorism from, can you kind of give us some definition and a backstory, not only on the term itself, but your personal experience and what you're doing with the project that you've embarked upon?
Yes, absolutely. Colorism is the excuse me, the discriminatory practice of favoring lighter skin over darker skin. And it actually goes back to slavery. It goes back to when Africans were brought here to the United States and they began to be when our women were violated and raped, they produced children who were of lighter complexion. And so those children, because they were masses children, tended to be favored more so than the darker Africans that had been brought here. I say as hostages, brought here as hostages, and so the treatment of the lighter skinned slaves. We talk about the house slaves and the field slaves. Typically, the house slaves were the lighter skinned slaves, so they were in the house, which was better, I guess, than being in the field. Slavery is slavery, but they were better in the house than in the field. And so the better treatment of the light skinned slaves was where colorism really began. And you can even find it talked about in the Willie Lynch letter, where he talks to fellow slave owners about how to control slaves. And he talks about dividing us by skin color, dividing us by height, weight, all those kinds of things to be able to keep us divided. And he even said in this letter that that could go on for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And so certainly colorism has done that. We find in the Black African American community, we find it in all communities of color, actually, where there's this issue of colorism and lighter skin being considered the more beautiful, more valuable, more worthy. So the color of beautiful, I am the color of beautiful, and the color of beautiful media and entertainment is about talking about colorism, beginning to have more discussions about colorism. So I did a short film called Who Told You You're Black is Not Beautiful? And in it, we talk about colorism as it relates to those of African descent. Like I said, it goes across all communities of color, the Latin community, the Asian community, the even you find it in the Caribbean, you even find it in Jamaica and in the Caribbean, where anywhere there are differences of skin tones, you can find colorism and the favoritism of lighter skin over that of those who are darker skinned.
I see. So just for clarity, in the other communities that you mentioned, zeroing in on the Asian community, are you saying that there are different shades of Asian people and they have colorism among them, or are you talking about how other communities specifically treat lighter African American or lighter skinned African Americans?
Actually, within that community, actually within the Asian community, they do vary by skin tone. You also find it in the Indian community, those from India, where lighter Indians and the darker Indians, and India sometimes too is more of a, it also boils down to a caste system in India, but a lot of it still is based on the shade of your skin. So yeah, in all communities of color, there are that whole idea that the lighter skin is more beautiful, more valuable, more worthy.
What type of inequities do darker skin? I take it from looking at your website, we're mostly talking about the female darker population, but would that same inequity be toward the males as well?
Absolutely. Now, excuse me, we talk about it more for females because we talk about beauty. So we talk about it from a beauty standpoint, that lighter skin is more accepted as beautiful, as valuable, as worthy. You'll find that when you're looking at, even in media and entertainment, that Halle Berry, Beyonce, Alicia Keys, even back when you look back even further, Lena Horne, these were the women who were considered beautiful Black women. You don't see people talking about Viola Davis as a beautiful Black woman, or Lupita Nyong'o, or Angela Bassett. None of these women are held up as far as beauty. They're very talented, very gifted. But when we start talking about beauty and what's beautiful for Black women, it doesn't tend to be women who look like me or women who are darker than me. We're not the standard of beauty when we talk about beauty in the media, in entertainment, even in our own families and in our own communities.
Well, that's that, and that was a question for me because I guess there's an understanding of growing up in America that there's a particular standard, and color is oftentimes based on those standards. But you're saying that in our own communities, there are inequities that are suffered from darker skinned Black women.
Absolutely. Colorism is both interracial and intraracial. So within our own communities, we do that within our own communities. Well, we do it in families, which was something that was very, very interesting to me too, is in a lot of my studies, is that within the family structure, many times lighter skinned children are favored over darker skinned children.
Now, let me
And
ask: by the siblings, by the parents, by who where is the
it can be
inequity?
siblings, be parents, it can be grandparents.
Hmm.
I've heard, people have told me stories that their siblings by parents were favored, that the lighter skinned siblings were favored over the darker skinned siblings. And that many times it was the parents, it was aunts, it was grandparents. And then the children begin to pick up on the children begin to pick up the message that, okay, the lighter you are, the more beautiful you are. And the darker you are, the less beautiful you are. So it happens within the family structure. It happens within our communities where, and it's so interesting. And I don't know if you have necessarily maybe noticed it as a man, but it is in particularly, maybe because I'm a woman, I've noticed it more as a woman, that we many times have these issues when we're around each other as Black women, that if you're lighter skinned, then you feel like you're better than dark. And not all, I'm not saying this about all light skinned women, but many times there are light skinned women because they've been conditioned to believe they are the beautiful ones. That many times when we're in the same room together, we have many difficulties communicating and interacting with one another because we have these ideals about who's beautiful and who's not beautiful. And
Interesting.
colorism does affect men also. It does affect men. I even recently saw an article where Tyrese Gibson talked about how he experienced colorism coming up, and in no way, I mean, now he's a sex symbol now, but when he said growing up, he did not feel that he was attractive or handsome or anything and wasn't treated like he was.
Was he in his community or in the movie industry?
In his community,
I
in
see.
in the school system that he was in, and even I think as he started, even in, I believe he started as a singer before he started acting. So I think maybe possibly even first started in when he first started in the entertainment industry, he may have also experienced it then.
Well, that's interesting because Denzel is probably the most sought after, even though he's happily married, but he's the most sought after
Yeah.
African American or actor. I mean, just across the board. Then, of course, Idris Elba, has really for
Yes,
the
he's
last
very
10 years
beautiful.
kind of dominated, and he's a darker skinned man. So this was something that was new to me. Again, when I first heard the term colorism, I needed to find out exactly which angle we're talking about, because okay, we have a class system, obviously, that is America, but within
Right,
the own family
right.
structure is interesting to me, you know.
Yeah, and I think too that if you notice now, I don't know so much that Denzel, and I'm a big Denzel fan, and I don't think that Denzel played a whole lot of. He was more fortunate. He didn't have to play a lot of drug dealers
Right.
or criminals, because many times if you notice, if you watch closely, a lot of times dark skinned men are the criminals
Well, sure.
in the
Yeah,
movie.
I've kind of noticed that. Yeah.
Yeah, they're the criminals. And so that comes back to a lot of colorism and the idea that, you know, the darker your skin is, you're more likely to be a criminal. Even with women, you'll see where a lot of times darker skinned women are the prostitutes in the movie. They're the crackheads. You know, this is where we see it a lot in entertainment about how we're being cast based on the narrative that we've had to deal with.
Well, and you bring up a good point, which is, I think it may be unfortunate for me to say that through the decades there has been an acceptability of that, and I'm not saying that that's right. That's an unfortunate statement. What is a little disconcerting is the fact that amongst our own community that there's this class system that's happening, because in coming up I always heard, and I'm talking 9, 10, 11 years old, the blacker the berry the sweeter the juice, so there was never, that was a phrase, at least here in our little villa of Youngstown, Ohio. So I never thought, well, the darker the person is, the more amongst us, the more criminal minded, or the more that we should back off of them. I
Well,
hope I'm making sense
that's
in that
interesting.
phrase.
Yeah,
It's like,
that's interesting because
our
I think
community, at least among our family and our community, that wasn't something that we were all in it together. And, there was the whole hue, the whole, spectrum of the hue,
right.
and it was all good. So,
Wow, that's
yeah.
interesting. That's really interesting because I think that, um, especially within our communities, the issue is that we have to begin to change the narrative, and we have to be the ones that form the narrative, that no one else gets to tell us what's beautiful in our communities. But unfortunately, in a lot of our communities, we have adopted this whole idea, which came from slavery, that lighter skin is better than darker skin, and that, I think that it's gotten somewhat better than it has been in the past. I think we're even adapting natural hair more so, even more, that we don't have to have our hair straight to be accepted, and that we don't have to buy into the whole looking as European as we possibly can to be beautiful. But I find that I think that still within the media and within Hollywood, that we're still looking at this narrative that continues to show us that what's beautiful is, and I'm not saying Halle Berry isn't beautiful, she's a very beautiful woman, but that's not the scope of the beauty of Black women.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, tell us a little bit more about the movie. It's a film short that
It's,
you
yeah.
created.
Yes, it's a short film that I did, and I originally did it for African American Women in Cinema, was doing a panel on colorism. And so the founder, Tara Renee, asked me if I knew of a short film, and she said, if not, you can do one. So I took on the challenge. It was a challenge, let me tell you.
Was Amber involved with that at all, or?
No, not that one. She wasn't. But I took on the challenge of doing this short film, and it was great. It was amazing because I had the opportunity to speak to quite a few women and to listen to their stories. And we covered it. We spoke to a couple of light-skinned women also, to understand that they do also experience some of the residual effects of colorism. So we talked to 2 light-skinned women, and then we had 4 dark-skinned women to tell their stories. And it was really very interesting to hear people and their experience. And one of the young ladies talked about how she experienced it within her family. And another young woman talked about how she experienced it even with close friends and people who, kind of just basically were saying that, you know, she said one guy told her, he likes his women light skin. Okay. You know.
So let me just say, I mean, I'm going to play devil's advocate for just a second or two. So with respect to going back to the lighter skinned women that you talked to, you said they felt some residual effect. Did they feel more privileged, or did they feel like they were treated differently or special? That's the one. I have about 3 others, but was that their experience?
Well, a lot of light-skinned women many times talk about how they were bullied by darker skinned women,
Wow.
especially if they had a certain grade of hair. I've heard women talk about having their hair cut by darker skinned women. My sister actually was one of the lighter skinned women who talked in the film, and she did a very interesting piece that she wrote called "Too Dark to Be Light, Too White to Be Black." No, too light to be white, too dark. No, that's not right. Let me think. It's
Sure.
too dark to be white, too light to be black. So it's kind of this experience of you're not accepted by white people because they consider your skin as darker, whereas black people consider your skin as lighter. So they don't always consider you to be black. She's had a lot of people ask her throughout her life, "What are you?" And she's like, "What do you mean? What am I? I'm black." But because her skin is lighter and she has a certain grade of hair that's a little different, many times people ask her, "What are you?" And she gets very offended by it.
I
She gets very
see.
offended by it because she's black. Both our mother and father are black. Now, I'm sure there's some other things that were mixed in, like most of our families. Some other things were mixed in there, but both of our parents were black. So
Yes.
she's had to deal with many times not being considered black because her skin is so light.
I see.
And like I say, she gets very offended,
I
very
understand. Is she
offended. And this is
younger
and this
than
is
you?
black people that ask her, "What is she?"
Is she younger or older than you? May I ask that?
She's just a little younger than I am.
Just a little younger.
Just a little.
I got you. So the next
You know,
question
when
would,
she was born, I asked my mother, why was she white and I was black? My mother got very upset with me and told me she is not white, but she was very, very fair when she was born.
and just kept the fair skin throughout her
Yeah, I
life.
mean,
So,
she got a little more color with it as she grew up, but yeah, she's still light skinned.
mhm.
And it was interesting because she didn't even want to be light skinned. I had to tell her, you're light skinned, and it's okay, but you're light skinned.
Now I saw, and you're pushing buttons because now you're making me want to ask more questions because of what I saw on the website. I think there was a trailer, or it was a minute, 60-second trailer, and I think that you were, I don't know if you were portraying someone or you were talking from your own experience about wanting to be lighter. Was that something
Yeah.
that you personally asked even as you were going through the situation with your sister, or are you portraying a character in that trailer?
Actually, there was a time in my life where I did wish I was lighter. Now, I never went into skin bleaching. I never did any skin bleaching or anything like that, but I did want to be lighter because of the experiences I had as a darker skinned woman.
I see.
Um, I wanted to be lighter so that I could be considered beautiful, that I would be thought of as beautiful. I wanted to be lighter. And you know, it's so interesting how we are so affected by all of this and many times don't even realize. I saw a video with Raven Simone where she said when she was doing not her show Not So Raven, she was going to the tanning salon
Hmm.
and they eventually told her she was getting too dark. She had to stop going to the tanning salon and she said I just wanted to be beautiful. So for her, being darker was beautiful and she was feeling, I guess that she was, I don't know, I don't want to put words in her mouth about what she was feeling about her skin tone, but she wanted to be darker. And I did a special, a colorism conversation special where I talked with a light skinned Black woman who said that she used to go to the tanning salon because she wanted to be darker.
I see.
She didn't like the way that she didn't like her light skin and she didn't like the way she was treated, that she wasn't considered Black enough.
I see. Well, may I ask, just going back to that trailer, so that was not you portraying a character, that was you speaking of your own experience,
Yes.
right? And with
Yes.
respect to that, was there something traumatizing that drove you to that point where you were saying, I wish I was lighter? Or was there, was there something that happened that was like, oh, well, this is what that means, and I must not be as beautiful as I felt I was before? I, you know,
Yeah. Actually, when I was in, I think it was fourth grade, I wanted to have lunch with this boy that I thought was cute, and he actually told me I was too dark
hmm.
for him to have lunch with me. I was too dark, and I found it
In
as I was
in the
getting
fourth
older.
grade, that's really
Fourth grade,
interesting.
yeah, and it's so interesting that it does start affecting children young when people are not conscious enough to confirm their beauty. I spoke with an elementary school teacher who told me that actually it was a kindergarten teacher, I think. She told me that she had dolls in her room and they were all different complexions. And she said the everybody picked all of the lighter complexion dolls. There was one dark skinned doll left, and the little girl that got the dark skinned doll threw it across the room and said, "That's the ugly doll." Now
Hmm.
this is like 5, 6 year olds.
My
And
goodness.
so who who told her that or who gave her that impression that the dark doll was the ugly doll? And this was
Right.
just last year. We're not talking about the 60s or the 70s or anything. We're talking about just last year.
Right.
This
Yeah,
little
that is
girl threw
that's
the
really
doll across
interesting.
the room and said that that dark doll is the ugly doll.
Wow. Now that's really interesting, and it makes me want to go back to the situation with respect to the fourth grade student, and then you a few minutes ago were talking about the guy who said that he preferred lighter skinned women, and that's where I picked up the devil's advocate because I wanted to say, do you think then that this gentleman was indoctrinated as a kid, or was it just his preference as a man? Because speaking as a man, before I got married to my beautiful Lord, let me just say that right off the bat. But before I got married, I mean, I dated all shades of different women, even outside of my race. Now, I don't want you to think that I was just that guy. It was not hundreds of women, but the significant dates that I had, I wasn't so color specific. I personally, and I'm not trying to create a defense for maybe those who were indoctrinated as a young age, but I was very interested in personality. And for me, as a musician and a drummer, I am attracted to personality first before I'm attracted to beauty or the figure or shape. It's a lot to do with a kindred spirit. So
Yeah.
I was going to ask you that question concerning that young man, and then you brought up the 4-year-old boy. So I guess it can be both and.
Yeah, I think it can be both. And I think that I'm going to say that when we look at how we are, as you said, indoctrinated, and how we're shaped as children as to what is considered beautiful, and that are we teaching our children, our boys as well as our girls, that first of all, like you said, personality is the most important thing. What kind of person is it? You know what I'm saying? I mean, if you're light skinned but you're a horrible individual, what is that going to do for the relationship, right? But I think that we have to be very mindful of showing our children that we first of all we judge people, as Martin Luther King said, not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, and that we do not begin to place this ideal that lighter skin is more beautiful, and that's what you should want to have. Because I think that we see it so much in, and I say it a lot. I see it a lot with athletes. A lot of athletes, either they have white women or they have light skinned women. Now there are some athletes who are married to darker skinned women, but I believe it's that whole ideal that my woman has to be light or white because that is what is going to get me in certain rooms, and that's what's going to make my life better. Because we've bought into the lie that that is what people want to see, and that's what you really should be projecting in your life, is that this woman who looks like a model is who's the best person to be with, and it might not be, and a lot of them have found that out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. A couple of things, and I wasn't planning on going this deep, but I have to ask you because, you know, I try to stay up and educated on different things, and from that standpoint, I read an article on an athlete, and he had an interesting perspective. I won't mention this athlete's name, but this athlete did marry outside of his race. With respect to being quote unquote checked by the interviewer, who was a black woman asking him
Mm.
that, he gave a very interesting perspective. I would like to know your reaction on it. What he said was he did not marry his wife so that he can get into different rooms, or that she could be what they call a trophy wife, or some status with respect to society. But he said he noticed something among the women of his community, the African American community. Many in his age, he's much younger than we are, and in his generation, most of the women that he grew up with in the neighborhoods did not have fathers, did not learn how to respect men because of the ways that their mothers talked to them, most of them single mothers, his words, not mine, most of them single mothers, and the way that they disrespected men, that these women that he dated had no respect for him, where his wife certain generation of culture and respect, and they had that sub, I'm putting the word submissive in. I'm not sure of the word that he used, but it was more of being a wife, knowing how to be a wife because she had a mother who was a wife to her father. I guess I'm explaining that well. So hopefully I've set the table with enough that you can respond to that. I just thought that that was interesting because the sister who was interviewing was really, and it wasn't a video, it was a article. So I was reading it, but even on the pages of the article, she was really checking him on his choices. So that's his answer. So what do you think about that? I mean, call it
Well,
out.
here's, I would
Just,
say, you know,
you know.
um, there's part of me that would say that's a cop out,
Okay.
but simply because I can't believe that if he went to college, I can't believe that he didn't meet any Black women unless he went to a predominantly white college. I can't believe that he did not meet any Black women that grew up with a mother and a father, or that they all disrespect Black men. I find that a little difficult to believe. But the one thing that I have learned is that, for one thing, a lot of men that marry outside of the race, many times they grew up in places where they grew up with white people. So if you go to school with a lot of white people and you grow up with a lot of white people, 9 times out of 10, this is who you're connected to. That a lot of times that's who you're going to marry. You're going to be connected to people. So people from different um, areas, lots of times there are some Black people who say they didn't grow up around a lot of Black people. They grew up around white people. So that's who they connected with. But I find it a little troubling for him to say that the Black women that he came in contact didn't respect him, and I find that hard to believe.
Well, I appreciate your response. I just thought, it was, because you mentioned the athletes and that's their, and it's interesting that it's been about maybe 2 years ago or so since I
Oh,
read that
okay.
article, but I'm like, okay, well, I mean, again, being a person who's dated outside of my race, again, it wasn't like, wow, this is who I'm going to get with because of this. It was just, and again, being a musician, being in
Yeah,
multi-ethnic environments, and
right.
just the kindred spirit is like, bro, we're rolling on the vibe of the music or, the art or the creativity, and it goes up another level. So,
Yeah, and let me say this also, that
sure.
I think that we have to understand too that it's not always about the color of a person's skin, because who you fall in love with is who you fall in love
Is who
with,
you fall in love.
and who you date is who you date, as long as you're not doing it because you don't feel that women who have darker skin are not worthy.
Correct.
If you meet somebody that happens to be of another race, that happens to be a lighter skinned woman, and that's who you fall in love with, that's who you fall in love with, but not that it's excluding
Sure.
darker skinned women because you don't feel they're beautiful or they don't have any value.
I agree.
So I do try to make that very clear, that it's not about, because I did have to get over the Black men with the white women, and I think all Black women have had to address that issue within ourselves, because many times when we see that, I know for myself, I can't speak for all Black women, but I know for myself, my question would always be, um, there was not one Black woman that you could be with, and because again, we've been made to feel so many times that we are not the woman that you want to have on your arm in certain places. We've been made to feel that way.
Hmm.
And I think in a lot of times it would be in a lot of times if Black men could understand that when we're talking about interracial relationships or relationships where it seems like men in high power positions tend to have women that don't look like me. So it for us it's kind of like an issue. Okay, so and I say that to my husband sometimes. I'm like, can't you help a sister out? You got money, you've got this, but here you got these. Can you help a sister out?
Well, let's put.
He always gets on me when I see these athletes, and I'm like, can you help a sister out? Let a sister have a good life.
So let's put the shoe on the other foot. Then what about when the role is reversed and it's a white man with a Black woman? I mean, I've heard enough brothers say similar things, masses in the slave house again, that type of but then there are a degree of sisters who say, well, especially because of the stereotypical hip hop gangster thug life Black man, that's not what she wants. Then she wants a man who's going to be loyal. I mean, and I have, you got to see my family. I mean, I have interraciality,
Yeah.
through different segments of families and cousins and nieces and nephews or what have you, and it's just like, yo, this is what it is. No problem. But the conversations do go on, and sometimes you get into the real ones and you hear it. So what is your response for the African American woman who migrates toward the Caucasian male, or maybe another male outside of her community? Same stigma or different?
It's interesting because I think that for when it's Black women with white men, that you kind of even wonder how it happened. Because in the sense that I don't think white men pursue Black women. We don't see it that way. We don't see white men pursuing Black women. So we're kind of like, well, how did that happen?
Is that that's interesting.
It's not, it's not something that we really. We're kind of.
I'm sorry. I didn't. But I would think the male is the initiator in many relationships. So you're saying in this regard, you think that it was the woman that initiated?
No, I'm not saying that. I just think that as Black women, and it could be now, and let me say this again, it comes back to what rooms you're in, where you are connected. Because, for instance, I know for myself, I rarely come in contact with white men. Rarely. I go to an all Black church. You know what I'm saying? It's pretty much an all Black church. I'm not in the workforce. I work for myself. Most of the groups that I belong to be perfectly honest, are Black women, or they're groups for Black entrepreneurs. So I don't have, and even growing up, though I went to a predominantly white high school, but my first year in college was Fisk University, an all Black school. My other years in college it was a mixed group of people, but I tended to gravitate towards the Black student union, the Black people. I'm that person. I'm the Black person, right? So I did not have a whole lot of exposure to white men. So for me, it's kind of like, I guess I would say it's kind of like just an interesting perspective, because it's not an experience that I've had of being in enough different groups where I would say that there was a white man who would be interested in me, or I would be interested in him. I just haven't had that experience. And a lot of it goes really back to experiences. If you go to a college where there are, a mixture of ethnicities, if you haven't gone to an HBCU, you've gone to a college where there are a mixture of ethnicities and you're being exposed to so many different cultures, then that is definitely possible for that to happen. But when you live in an all Black neighborhood, you go to an all Black church, everything is black. I think lots of times you just are kind of like, that's an interesting perspective or an interesting relationship that these women were actually pursued by white men. It's interesting.
Hmm. Interesting.
And I can understand the
Interesting is right.
perspective of, it's, black men seeing it as you know, it's massa and
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that's the interesting thing about conversations. And that's the interesting thing about finding out about people and how they met and, this whole dynamic
Right.
of, because I don't think you see as many black women with white men as you see black men with white women.
Yeah. And
I think you see
I
more
guess
of it
that would
now
be
because you're getting a lot of
sure.
more interracial relationships now.
Sure.
We're seeing a
Sure.
lot of that more now.
Sure. Yeah, I just wondered. I needed to put the shoe on the other foot, but here's the thing, Dr. Karen. You've allowed me to take you down a rabbit trail, which we were here to talk about your movie. So let's put the train back on the tracks, and you tell us about the movie, and tell us where we can find it, and tell us a little bit more about the Color of Beautiful, the organization, and then
Yes.
I could stop, picking at you. But I appreciate you. I really do. I appreciate it. It
Absolutely.
was just your wealth of information. I wanted to hear your perspective on some of the things that I've heard because again, you were the first person ever, 2023, that I've heard the
Oh,
term
wow.
colorism. So I definitely needed to dive in and find out what it was.
Yes, yes, it's my pleasure. So the movie Who Told You You're Black is Not Beautiful, we give a glimpse into colorism, the history of colorism. We talk a little bit about the Willie Lynch letter, and then we have some stories of women who talk about their experiences with colorism. And so the movie it's a short 35 minutes. On our YouTube channel, you can see a 15-minute I would call it a 15-minute version of the 35-minute movie is on our YouTube channel. And so the 35-minute version we use for being able to go into colleges and organizations and show the movie and have conversation. I believe it's very important to have conversations on colorism. I wanted this to be a movie that just wasn't people go and see it and say, "Oh yeah, that's true. I know that happens," but that there would actually be conversation about colorism and about interacting with one another and having that safe space to talk about the issues that we have faced. And it's been wonderful. The conversations that I've had after the movie and things have been just absolutely amazing. So you can go to our website there, thecolorofbeautiful.black, and that will lead you to the YouTube channel and to the film, the 15-minute version of the film. And from thecolorofbeautiful.black, you'll be able to contact us if you are interested in having the film screened for your organization or college or high school or anywhere that the colorism conversation needs to take place.
Yeah, that's fantastic. What type of feedback have you been getting so far from the screening?
Really great feedback. It's been interesting. During one screening, a young woman said afterwards that she was actually texting her light-skinned sister during the film that they've got to stop teasing their light-skinned cousin.
Hmm.
No, they weren't light skinned, but they were teasing their light skinned cousin. And she said, we've got to stop teasing our light skinned cousin. Because people don't realize the damage
Yeah.
that it does when you sometimes, I mean, teasing kids do that, but sometimes we're not understanding the damage that it does to people in their lifetime. That damage that's being done. So, and people I've had the opportunity to talk to both light skinned and dark skinned women who have told, their stories, and they've had an opportunity. They were so grateful to be able to have the opportunity to talk about something that doesn't get talked about in their family or even among their friends. It's something that's just not talked about.
Wow. Well, I certainly appreciate you coming on to open our minds about something that we didn't know, and how it can impact us as a people. Because at the end of the day, we're just people. We're human beings, and you
Right.
quoted Martin Luther King very well. It's the content of our character, not
Yes.
necessarily the color of our skin, although we tend to focus on skin more than we should.
Yes,
So I really
we do.
appreciate you sharing that with us. And
Thank you
so,
so
how can
much.
people get in touch with you? With they through the color of beautiful? Is that
The
how they
color
get in
beautiful
touch?
dot black. Yes. The email is info at the color of beautiful dot black. And we're on all social media as the color of beautiful. Color spelled COLOUR because you are beautiful.
Oh, excellent. That's fantastic. Well, listen, when you see my friend Robin Williams, okay, you kiss him on the forehead for me. Will you do
I
that?
will. I certainly will.
Well, I definitely appreciate you coming on. Thanks. And it won't be the last time, okay?
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, that was Dr. Karen Moore. Wonderful conversation, a little left of center than we talk about here on the Entre Musician. But, it does have to do with music. It does have to do with musicians because, again, we are human. And so we talk about it might spark a song that you might want to write about now that you are aware of what colorism is. My name is Jerry B. Listen, I want you to like, subscribe to this channel, share the video, tell everybody you know and 14 people you don't that you get down with the Entre Musician. My name is Jerry B. I'm an Entre Musician, but you know what's most important. So are you. We'll see you again next time. God bless.